Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to those folks who are online. We are in the Resilience Hub, which is an amazing meeting space here at the COP, and definitely has the best coffee, which is key for all of us who are now in day 2. And we're really excited to welcome everyone to this session today, where we'll focus on coastal resilience. We've got an amazing group of speakers, many of whom are online, joining us from all over the world, from the Philippines to Colombia, to Tanzania, which is great. My fellow facilitator is Rachel Terry from Van Oord. I am Karen Sack from the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance. We work to drive investment into coastal and marine nature-based solutions. We've got a goal of activating at least $500 million of investment into these solutions by 2030, and building the resilience of at least 250 million coastal climate vulnerable people around the world. And we're very excited as well to be a Race to Resilience initiative and to be here with all of you today. So very briefly to outline our event, it has 3 parts to it. As everyone knows, the ocean is a very big place, and there are coastlines all over the world that are impacted. So we are starting off with a focus on technology and innovation, and how we can use data and knowledge to help us understand and model forward approaches to building resilient ecosystems. The second part of our session here will focus on project innovations on the ground in various countries around the world to build resilience, working from the bottom up in order to drive those outcomes. And then our third panel focuses on the finance and policy investments that are needed, and how we can tie these various things together to drive change. One little piece of housekeeping before we set off on this journey around the world is that for those folks who are online and can hopefully see us in the room, particularly the speakers and our speakers who will be here, we have a timekeeper in Federico, who's sitting in the front, and he has little paddles that are different colors. And if you get a yellow paddle, that means you need to start wrapping up. And if you get a red paddle...
Welcome to COP26. Can I remind you to wear a face mask over your mouth and nose at all times during your stay. Exceptions are if you are seated in a room with appropriate distance between people, while eating and drinking, or if you are medically exempt. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
That's the red paddle for COVID. So if you get a red paddle, please, if Federico holds it up, or for those of you online, if you get a little message in the chat to say, please wrap up. We do have a lot to get through today, and we really want to make sure that we have time for questions at the end as well. So with that, Rachel, I'm going to hand over to you for the first panel that we have today.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Karen, and good morning and welcome to everyone online and here in the room. Thank you for joining us. Indeed, as Karen said, we've got a lot to get through, so let's get started. I would like to just briefly introduce the people who are joining us for the first part of the event, where we're going to touch on technology and data and how we can use that information and knowledge. So I would like to introduce Reinoud Wiersma, who is from Fornords. Tony Long, who is joining us online. He's from the Global Fishing Watch, and then also Lindsay Getchell, who's from AXA XL. So Reinoud, maybe we can start with you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much, Rachel. I think technology, I'm all right. Thanks, Rachel. I would like to take the moment first to introduce Fornords. We are a Dutch family-owned company, already very active, starting in the Netherlands 150 years ago. We are working in coastal defenses, dredging, working offshore wind, being part of the energy transition. We also do marine infrastructure. We always work at the verge of land and water, and we try to defend people in our country. I live personally also below the sea level, so we try to protect people in the rest of the world as well. We had a celebration for 150 years of the company Van Oord, And then we invited Cristiana Figueiras, who presented a story, and she urged us really to step up our game and challenge us to be more proactive in climate action. And that was a start for us to develop a tool which we'll show you a little bit around in a few minutes. It's a tool where we see the whole world, and we have all the locations in the world. We have the levels of the land. We look at the inundation, we look at the sea level rise, and we try to identify spots in the world where people are in danger, and we really would like to contribute in saving these people. I think in general there were a lot of initiatives to take climate action. And we wanted really to have something, a tool to understand where all the problems are in the world and where we can contribute to help other people doing our techniques, our solutions, which we also have been developing in the Netherlands. Maybe to give you some examples of what we've been doing, we have been doing a lot of nature-based solutions. We've been doing dredging works, we've been doing the Palm Islands in Dubai, which is a good example of creating new land. So if the sea level is rising, we can always create new land at different locations. We did the Hong Kong airport, and further we are part of taking part of the energy transition by creating wind farms in the Netherlands, and we're also exporting that to abroad. So really looking forward with our new tool, which is online, which you can find using our website, but also we can provide the link to you as well. And it's an interactive tool where everybody from the whole world, we are using open source data, and we would like to share this data with the rest of the world. And it's our intention that we don't want to use it commercially that much, but we also want to incentivize people awareness where the problems are, where we can defend coastlines. And once we identify those, we want to work together with the shareholders and stakeholders to see if we can come up with solutions which can defend the people in maybe small island countries. That we have done this in the Maldives, where we've been raising land. So I think there's a lot of islands in the Pacific which are in danger at the moment. Small countries like Tuvalu, which we could save with our solutions. But I think the next step for us is to see how can we create partnerships, collaborate via this platform, but also with other parties. And that's also why we appreciate our partnership with ORRAA. And that we can join forces together. We need the financial communication. We need all the parties to help combat this problem and come into action. And with that, I would like to introduce our small video clip, which gives a bit of introduction on our tool. And especially I would like to mention as well, we're looking also at places where we can cultivate mangroves, corals. And I think maybe in the future we also need to find out where corals can grow in the 1.5 scenario. So maybe we need to look a little bit further north, see if in the Mediterranean we can do some coral restorations. So thank you. Please watch this video.
To know where in the world coastal areas are most at risk of getting flooded, we therefore developed the Climate Risk Overview, a smart tool powered by Van Oord, using open source data that brings together key parameters such as low-lying land, populations and assets at risk, sea level rise and flood exposure, coastal erosion and ecology, all mapped onto every 10-kilometer stretch of coastline in the world. With the tool, one can locate vulnerable coastal areas that need protection. This helps to create the right dialogue and focus for climate adaptation actions.
Van Oord's Climate Risk Overview will play a key role in broadening understanding of climate risks and opportunities.
Let's connect for climate adaptation action.
Thank you, Reinoud. Thank you for that introduction. I'd just like to quickly jump in and say welcome to Gonzalo Munoz from Chile, one of the high-level champions who's joining us here in the room. He's the high-level champion for the Race to Zero and the Race to Resilience, so thank you and welcome. Would you like to say a couple of words quickly?
Thanks so much. Let me take my mask off for speaking. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining today. It's really great to be at the Ocean Risk and Resilient Action Alliance, who are having, I think, a very good COP so far, and great to be again in the Resilience Hub. It's a real, I mean, we're really proud as a Climate Champions team to have this house and be full all the time. I believe that we've already had like more than 6,000 people visiting the climate, the Resilience Hub so far. So it's amazing. And of course, there are certain elements that are also making us very happy. The last week, Canadian Prime Minister confirming that those $9 million commitment to the Alliance. And of course, the UK reaffirmation of the invention into ORRAA through the Blue Planet Fund. So congratulations, big achievements, and great for the whole of the community, not only for ORRAA. I mean, we know that represents much more than just the organization. Also, the private sector financially supporting the Alliance and the Black Blue campaign. And of course, we as Climate Champions are endorsing. During the ocean days, we heard multiple stakeholders about how much potential lies into the ocean to deliver this resilient future with some very, very encouraging announcement, right? We know that really well, and it seems to me like it has taken us so long to understand the importance of ocean, not only in mitigation, when of course there's so much in terms of the capacity of the ocean to sequester, but also to restore the stability of the whole planet. There's so many aspects in mitigation that are related to ocean when it comes to shipping and tourism and of course fisheries and of course coastal lines. So when it comes to raising resilience, of course we're focused on coastal lines and coastal communities, but that is at the entry point, let's say, to integrate all of the rest, not only the coastal communities, but the ports, and of course nature serving the whole of the ecosystem. We know that it's not only about, again, ocean nature-based solutions, but shipping, as they play a really relevant commitment, but then we're pushing as hard as we can for the 30-30 commitments. The Race to Resilient campaign and of course the Marrakesh Partnership Climate Resilience Pathways are offering a vision around mitigation and adaptation that need to be much more balanced. It's something that in this COP, and I honestly, well, at this in the previous COP, we're trying to balance as much as we could, of course, recognizing that we failed in terms of wasn't the level of balance that we are starting to see now, and that's part of our pride. We're positioning or really, really encouraging all of the climate community to position resilience at the same level of mitigation, because we really know, all of us, that we will fail if we just focus on mitigating the climate crisis through mitigation actions. And today, the Resilience Day is about putting people and nature in the center and pursuit of a resilient world where people thrive despite the crisis and not just survive of the crisis. When it comes to the way of solving the crisis, we know that climate change impact on ocean, putting at risk 40% of coastal population of those who rely on the ocean for their livelihood and food security. We're having a conversation about small fisheries and many communities that rely on that. And we recognize that ocean is being, again, more and more vital, and that, again, takes us to considering what happened with us, that we had the blind spot for so long. Now we need to ensure that we'll never fall back into the, let's say, the secondary role, but rather be in the center of it. We've seen increased public and private investment, including blended finance needed, and then it all takes us again to the solidarity element of the agenda. We know that the crisis is affecting mostly and hardest the most vulnerable, those less responsible of creating the crisis, and in that sense, the seas, the small island states, we're now calling the boss. It should be our boss, the big ocean states. And the less developing countries should be prioritized on investments as they are far more exposed and will experience losses in more extreme manner. We know that investing in resilience is not just the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do, and this is especially true when it comes to nature-based solutions, where we need to really restore and protect coastal ecosystem directly, obtaining the direct benefits for the coastal population. And I just want to end by saying that we are seeing an increased recognition of the power of nature-based solution, and major industry players like Van Oord, who are here today, and I will, through that, talk about the importance of the Netherlands and some other countries like even Norway that are really pursuing for more ambition when it comes to how do we integrate oceans as a way of not only again mitigate but also work on building more resilience. So thanks so much for that, and congratulations, and of course thanks to ORRAA and Oord, and would love to hear more about the innovations and the opportunities that are being discussed around building more resilience, because this is an urgent aspect, it's a survival aspect, and as our dear Emma Howard Boy always says, either we adapt or die, and we'd rather adapt. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo, and can't underestimate how important Chile has been and your leadership in driving this agenda forward, from the first Blue COP in Madrid in 2019, the designation of over 30% of your waters as fully protected, and the work that's being done on actually driving ocean resilience, which is a perfect segue really to Tony Long from Global Fishing Watch, who's going to talk to us about some of the tech that they use. And Chile is one of the first countries that has released a whole lot of its data into the Global Fishing Watch system. So Tony, going to hand over to you. Hopefully you're there somewhere in the ether and can join us to talk with us about Global Fishing Watch.
Thank you, Karen. So yes, just a few words before I introduce a video. Thank you to ORRAA and Oord for inviting us to introduce this technology. At Global Fishing Watch, we believe that science, innovation, and actionable data are key building blocks to rapidly understand what risks truly face our ocean. Ocean action is indeed climate action. We've heard that rhetoric this week and last, and people need to believe it. A healthy and productive ocean is a vital asset to achieving a resilient, nature positive, net zero future, but we've got to do better in monitoring and managing human activities at sea to make sure we do not push the ocean beyond its limits. Global Fishing Watch is advancing ocean governance through increased transparency of human activity at sea. We create and publicly share map visualizations, data and analysis tools, and we enable scientific research and drive transformation in how we manage our ocean by informing and improving policy. One such tool that harnesses open data alongside key environmental information is our Marine Manager portal. And I'm very pleased to be able to share a short video with you all about how this technology is being used to revolutionize the way we can manage and make decisions in order that we can put in place and adapt and mitigate to make sure climate change does not impact us in the future. So I'll let the video play now.
Our ocean provides vital ecosystem services and benefits that are crucial for human well-being and the prosperity of the global economy. But these services are at risk. The world needs to move rapidly to ensure a healthy, resilient ocean. We need to work together to restore and protect biodiversity in the face of rising water temperatures and ocean acidification, and secure the sustainability of fish stocks. We must implement management measures that secure the long-term health of the ocean and the livelihoods and economies that depend on it. But effective management is often hindered by a lack of information about how humans are impacting the ocean. Now, satellite technology, big data, and machine learning are providing new and innovative solutions to help achieve a resilient ocean. Donna Bertarelli's vision in founding Global Fishing Watch Marine Manager was to bring like-minded philanthropists and supporters together to ensure robust and science-based management to fully realise the contribution of protected areas and monitor the effectiveness and impact of those protections over time. Marine Manager provides near real-time, dynamic and interactive data on ocean conditions, biology and human use activity to support marine spatial planning, marine protected area design and management, and scientific research. In the freely accessible portal, anyone can visualise and analyse human activity at sea, such as fishing and shipping, in defined geographical areas of interest. Publicly available oceanographic datasets, like sea surface temperature and phytoplankton productivity, allow anyone to view and understand environmental patterns. Managers and researchers can upload their own environmental datasets, such as sensitive cold water coral locations or animal migration routes, to inform management and protection of vulnerable species. Workspaces and analyses can be shared between stakeholders, such as researchers, scientists, policymakers, industry, and local communities, facilitating inclusive decision making.
Good data are going to be really important for us to manage the MPA properly. We really want all our management decisions to be made on the sound evidence base. The Global Fishing Watch portal is going to revolutionise the way we use remote sensing data and bring it together in a really accessible way that's going to quickly feed into management decisions we make.
We are now pursuing collaboration with stakeholders that are working to improve management of coastal ecosystems and secure a sustainable future for dependent communities. We want the Marine Manager portal to be widely available and accessible to help advance understanding of the threats to our blue planet and support adaptive and flexible management approaches to our changing ocean.
Thank you for playing that video. Transparency and our technology offer a new way to monitor and understand our ocean. It's one that's science-based. By bringing in open data from leading global sources and combine them, we start to see what the complete picture is on our seas and in our seas. It's equitable. By making the portal and its information available to everybody, all stakeholders have equal access to the data that they need to make the right decisions. And it's transformative. By bringing complex data together in a way that can be easily used, it can directly inform the policy changes that are needed and improve the compliance around the world. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share this technology with you all.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for joining us. I really like the sustainability through transparency there in the back of your screen, which really encompasses what we're talking about here. I'd like to hand over to Lindsay Getchell from AXA XL to introduce us to the work you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present today. As Rachel said, I'm from AXA XL. I work on our Ocean Risk Initiative, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more in detail about our new tool, the Coastal Risk Index, which was launched on Friday at a roundtable hosted by ORRAA and the UK government. I should have some slides going up now. If you could go to the next slide, please. I just wanted to start by showing a little bit of context around why we built the Coastal Risk Index, as well as this sort of embodies what we do in the Ocean Risk Initiative generally. So in the next few years and in the coming future, it's clear that coastal communities will be increasingly at risk for coastal flooding as a result of climate change. By some estimates, by 2050, coastal cities could face costs of up to $1 trillion annually as a result of rising seas and storm surges. So it's very clear that coastal communities need to build solutions and build resilience to these risks. And as one of these solutions, we've been looking at how coastal ecosystems, specifically mangroves and coral reefs, play an important role in reducing flood risk to these communities. As one example, coral reefs can reduce up to 97% of wave energy, and mangroves also provide really important benefits in reducing flooding as well. But despite these benefits, these ecosystems haven't really been incorporated into how we model risk and model flood risk in coastal communities, and they've been sort of left out of risk management strategies. And as a result, this has led to sort of the continued undervaluation of these ecosystems and their continued degradation and destruction. And so this is where the Coastal Risk Index hopes to sort of break that cycle by quantifying the value of these ecosystems in reducing flood risk to these communities, and hoping to allow communities to integrate these into their risk management strategies using nature-based solutions, leading to both more resilient communities as well as improved biodiversity for the world. Next slide, please. So what is the Coastal Risk Index? So we've been working with our science partners at IHE Delft and the University of California, Santa Cruz to develop a global set of flood hazard maps that show flooding globally along coastlines at 90-meter resolution, showing flooding both in current conditions, but then projecting out to 2030 and 2050 under the impacts, taking into account the impacts of climate change. But most crucially, the crucial part of the index is how we have incorporated the impact that coastal ecosystems have in reducing flooding. So if you go to the next slide, please. What we've done is basically create two sets of global flood hazard maps, one showing flooding with ecosystems and one showing flooding without ecosystems. So this is just one example of what the index shows. So this is an example from the Philippines showing flooding in current conditions with mangroves present. And if you go to the next slide, please. This is the same area showing flooding in the same scenario if those mangroves disappeared. And so this is just one example, but this is what we've shown sort of globally as well. So if you go to the next slide, we also have data on the number of people who benefit from these ecosystems reducing flooding, and a next slide as well as the assets that are the value of assets that are protected by mangroves and coral reefs. So if you just go to the next slide, and just to wrap up in terms of how the Coastal Risk Index can be used, speaking from an insurance perspective, we're aiming for this to help us better understand risk, help us better price risk in terms of coastal flooding and taking into account the protective benefits of ecosystems. And of course, helping our clients as well as communities generally better understand their ocean risk and better understand how coastal ecosystems can be integrated into risk management solutions. And from an investor and development bank perspective, there's also important information that the index can have in terms of how they can assess sort of the long-term risk to investments and what the loss of those ecosystems would mean potentially for their assets along coastlines. And of course, most importantly, is how local communities and governments can use the index to map their ocean hazard and map sort of where ecosystems are currently providing benefits, as well as where they could in the future, in order to, again, help nature-based solutions become part of the conversation on how these communities can build resilience and manage their risk both now and into the future. So if you just go to my final slide, we have the Coastal Risk Index live now, so I would encourage everyone to explore our tool. It's sort of in a beta version right now, where we have data on the Philippines and Florida, but we will be expanding that globally very soon. So stay tuned and have fun exploring the Coastal Risk Index. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you to Lindsay, and thank you to Reinoud and Tony online for introducing us to these incredible tools which are demonstrating how science and knowledge can be brought together to really guide decision making in policy and legislation and business. So thank you very much. We'd like to move into the next part of our session, and for that transition moment we would like to share with you a video about ORRAA.
By 2050, an estimated 800 million people could be at risk from storm surge from extreme weather events. Coastal communities in the least developed countries and small island developing states are likely to be severely impacted, with women and girls especially hard hit. Our ocean and our planet are in peril. This equation is devastatingly simple. Climate risk plus ocean risk equals financial risk. Up to $8.4 trillion could be at risk to global companies in the coming decade if we don't recognize the risk that climate change poses. But this is not a problem for 30 years' time. it is a problem for today. At the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, we are focused on driving investment into coastal and marine natural capital, mitigating risk and building resilience in communities adapting to climate change. We are an international alliance connecting finance and insurance, governments and environmental organizations. We're about scaling solutions, accelerating action from top down to bottom up, and from the global south to the north. Through our Ocean Resilience Innovation Challenge, we're also nurturing grassroots solutions. One of the first winners was AFO in Tanzania. It's a community mangrove credit project that aims to establish a local voluntary carbon market to support coastal resilience and biodiversity by preventing further deforestation, encouraging reforestation, and establishing an evergreen mangrove conservation fund. As well as on-the-ground projects, financial solutions are also key. Take the Mesoamerican reef, a vitally important ecosystem stretching across the coasts of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala and Honduras. In a region where hurricanes put lives and property at risk, it provides critical protection against storm damage. A world-first coral reef insurance policy is based on a parametric concept that pays out a pre-agreed amount to a policyholder according to predefined event characteristics like peak storm wind speed, refined by the MAR Fund and insurance brokers Willis Towers Watson. ORRAA's work with the MAR Fund has been supported by the Canadian government. So there are early adopters in the private sector, but we know that there are more who want to come on board. And that is why we are launching the Back Blue Ocean Finance Commitment. Signing robust net zero commitments, driving financial system policy change, and investing in nature-positive outcomes for the ocean. We are making progress, but we have to move further and faster. We have to move at scale. Whether you're a fisher in the Philippines or a banker on Wall Street, we are calling on you to back blue. We all have a role to play and we're all part of the solution. Investing and building resilience in climate-vulnerable coastal communities at every level, catalyzing, scaling, and accelerating investment. That's why I back blue, and it's why you should back blue as well. Great. Well, that was so fascinating to hear about some of these tools that we can use to understand and model forward what we're doing. And we're now going to turn to some of our partners who are working around the world. Just in time management, we've managed to conquer some internet problems in Colombia and time zone issues with Tanzania. And so if we can welcome, please, all virtually, we have Flora Belenario from ORRAA in the Philippines, Maria Jose Gonzalez from the MAR Fund in Colombia. Reynard, you are still here joining us with Van Oord, so we're pleased to have you for this session as well to talk about a project in the UK. And then we've got Kritis Mtonga from Aqua Farms in Tanzania. And we are going to start in the Philippines, and I'm looking at the screen and not seeing anyone, so I'm hoping the tech is all good. Great. And maybe Flora, you can talk to us a little bit about your experience working with fisherfolk in the Philippines and some of the work that ORRAA has been doing to build resilience there through insurance methodologies.
Yeah. Magandang araw. Good day from the Philippines. So ORRAA is a leading behavior change organization in conservation. So that's our organization. So for over 45 years and across 60 countries, so we work closely with communities and local leaders to adopt behaviors that benefit both people and nature. So maybe I would like to start our story by applauding our small-scale fishers who are considered as our modern-day heroes, providing continuous supply of food on our table despite the threats of COVID-19. So these vulnerable groups are often the ones to take on huge risks of the trade, like volatility of pricing, unpredictability of the catch, and of course, the dangers of the sea. And then the limited access to financial services such as insurance of these unserved and underserved populations leave their household and their businesses with limited options to obtain financing, even manage their cash flow for household expenses, or even keep their only business afloat. And then talking to these fishers, you can feel how their family and its future are very valuable to them, to the best that they can. But despite the challenges that they want to build a bright future for their family, send their children to good school, having a nice house, and a lot more. So we're thankful with ORRAA that we're able to secure funding to incubate ideas on enabling access for our small-scale fishers to insurance. So the goal of this project is to really increase the financial resilience of the coastal fishing communities in the Philippines, along with our initiative on financial inclusion at RARE, which is the formation of savings clubs. So we're able to find mission-aligned partners here in the Philippines to help us create an enabling environment for our fishing household to access affordable insurance products to protect their livelihood and for them to be able to cushion the effects of natural and life cycle risk. At first, it was quite challenging because most of the fishers do not have any idea about insurance, how it works. But with the people underground that we are able to tap, with a strong relationship that we build with our partner local government units, we're able to successfully run the campaign on insurance education and enrollment. So when we ended the project just last September 30, so we're proud to say that more than 4,000, which is 8 times our target, we were able to get insurance coverage, and we hope to enroll more in the coming months. So it only shows that fishers and their families are more than willing to access these products if only given the right information, mechanisms, and motivation to support insurance access. And then the program really gave opportunities for our fishing communities to have access to social protection schemes that will help them in times of emergency. Now that fishers have access to insurance, they don't need to resort to borrowing to fund unexpected life events that will lead them to deaths and even exploiting our marine resources just to cover their expenses. So at the end of the day, we hope to see these communities prosper, provide opportunities to our fishers as we work together towards combating the effects of climate change, especially here in the Philippines.
Thank you so much, Flora. This is just such an innovative product. If we think about folks that are engaged in the informal economy around the world, particularly fisher folk, without any kind of a social net, a safety net, this kind of product innovation could really bolster their resilience and help make sure that they, in their activities, are defending the ecological resilience of the ecosystems that they depend on. And so, Flora, it would be fascinating to know, now that you've done this pilot and seen how successful it can be, what RARE is looking to expand it to other countries around the world.
So RARE aims to incorporate the lessons learned from the successful pilot into the Fish Forever program, so scaling it to coastal communities across, not just in the Philippines, but to 7 other countries where the program currently reaches for more than 1,000 communities. But then, despite the project's overwhelming success, it also had to surmount, some mountains, so pandemic-related restrictions due to the rising cases on sites obviously caused some interruptions and slowed down some of the project initiatives. And then another challenge that we have to face is that the private insurance provider did not have people on the ground, so they had to accredit insurance agents within the community, which quite takes some time. However, there was also low interest in accrediting these insurance agents due to the fear of contracting the virus while they go around the community to sell insurance, and also maybe because of the very low incentives also for them. So instead of pushing the products from the private companies, what we did is, with the comprehensive coverage, we rely mainly on the options provided by the government-owned insurance company here in the country. And then another challenge that we're having is that the cost of delivering insurance to rural communities is quite high. So as our partner fishers are quite sensitive with the cost involved in various insurance processes such as enrollment, claims processing, it is very also important to note that we need to innovate enrollment, payment collection, and insurance claim mechanisms necessary to reduce transaction costs and maybe complexities of the processes, which eventually we hope to entice more enrollees. And right now, what we did is leverage on our strong connection and engage local government unit partners to be actively involved in the enrollment process and monitoring of claims. And we hope to enroll more community agents, insurance agents in the future. Also, digital platforms are promising, but continue to present their own problems as connectivity remains an issue. Again, another characteristic of unserved and underserved geographies. And maybe lastly, recognizing the low insurance knowledge and awareness among the fishing communities. So insurance promotional materials, we were able to develop that and crafted and strategically employed during the project implementation. So the active participation also of the local government unit representatives were also instrumental during the literacy training and recruitment process and has significantly contributed in soliciting trust among fishers necessary for them to enroll. So we hope to engage and educate more community-based agents in the long run. So I think all in all, we need to consider the following, such as active involvement and collaboration with government partners. And then the presence of mission-aligned partners who are willing to serve these remote communities and help us find ways to address the challenges and offset the transaction cost of delivering insurance to fishing communities. And then creation of more and empowered community-based network of agents. And lastly, strengthening of insurance awareness and education campaign as we aim to scale this initiative also to other geographies.
Thank you so much. What an incredible example of action on the ground, working with communities, looking at problem solving. And I think particularly this was all done during COVID. So getting over those hurdles. And I know that for ORRAA, with some of the insurance partners that we work on, this will be an example that will be used time and time again as a way to build forward. And we're really looking to build forward moving into the future. Which takes us, I guess, all the way from the Philippines to Maria Jose in Colombia, and an example from microinsurance to the application of a macro insurance, a parametric insurance model to protect the Mesoamerican reef, the second largest reef in the world. And so, Maria Jose, I'm hoping your internet is working and that we can get you on the screen so that you can tell us about what you have been doing in applying insurance to restore the reef in Mesoamerica.
Hello.
Are you there, MJ? Can you
Yes,
hear
I'm
us?
here. I can
Yay,
hear you.
we can hear your voice. There you go.
Thank you very much, Karen, for the invitation. I'm happy I can make it and can actually be there at a distance. So the use of parametric insurance to cover the restoration of reefs after a hurricane is part of a larger initiative within MARFund that has the objective of increasing the resilience of the Mesoamerican reef ecoregion shared by Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras. We are privileged to work in alliance with Willis Towers Watson for this initiative, who has developed the insurance model, which is currently a gridded parametric model. The payout amount is informed by the baseline amount of live coral cover and the local response costs for each specific site that we work in. This year, we piloted four sites in the Mesoamerican reef that were covered by insurance. The coverage was placed through AXA Climate as the insurance policy provider. And the coverage for the sites was aggregated. So we have one policy for the 4 sites, and MARFund is the policy holder. But parametric insurance, which is fantastic, it's a great tool, is not a standalone tool. Other elements need to be developed and need to be in place to actually have the insurance be effective and provide the funding for restoration to take place in the water. So 2 of those elements that are required are, first, a reef response governance has to be built for effective restoration, and capacities have to be developed. And second, there has to be an effective mechanism to actually channel the funds to the sites where the restoration needs to take place in a quick fashion and an effective fashion. For the governance aspect, we work in collaboration with TNC, with the governments of each country, the local partners at each reef site, and we build the capacities and equip the teams. To date, we have formed and trained 5 response committees, 39 first responders. Those are the brigades that get into the water to do the restoration. And these include fishermen, tourism service providers, scientists, and government officials, among others. We have also trained 10 trainers from the region that will have the capacity to keep on building these capacities in brigades along the Mesoamerican reef. The insurance payout covers the cost of the reef response, which includes things such as fuel, boat captains, boat rental, per diem, food, etc. And the mechanism to channel the funds to the sites is our pre-existing emergency fund. So a clear procedure has been established to trigger the payment through the emergency fund, and funding is provided through a local NGO that has the capacity to receive the funds and to make the required payments to actually get their emergency response underway. So insurance to restore reefs requires a whole system of activities to be carried out. Of course, reef insurance is a great tool, but you need these other elements to make sure that you can actually do the restoration in the water. And I would just like to add that, carrying out this process for the Mesoamerican reef would not have been possible without the kind contributions of KfW, Global Affairs Canada, as you mentioned in the video, thanks to ORRAA, and the NatureBased Solutions Fund.
Thank you. Again, I mean, this is just incredible work, and it just shows the power, I think, as well of partnerships. None of this can be done alone. We need people working on the ground. Willis Towers Watson, the huge brokerage firm we'll hear from later, applying their brains to do this and making sure that we are aligning the importance of protecting nature, jobs and livelihoods in this kind of environment. And so, Maria Jose, as you look forward to building this program out, and I know the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, which is another ORRAA partner, is also working with you. How do you see expanding some of this work to build it forward?
Well, parametric insurance to cover the cost of restoring ecosystems after a climatic event, after a hurricane, for example, is actually very scalable. That's what we think, along with our partners at Willis Towers Watson. For scaling geographically in terms of reef insurance, there are 3 technical design requirements. One is to establish the relationship between the intensity of the event and the response costs, and also to have live coral cover information. So for the Mar region, when we began designing it, a study was carried out to determine the costs of carrying out that response, that emergency response in different sites. And live coral cover, well, now the Island Coral Atlas has been completed, so that is a fantastic source of information. The World Conservation Monitoring Center. And in the Mesoamerican Reef, we are very lucky to have the Healthy Reefs initiative that also measures coral cover in many different sites along the 4 countries. So live coral cover information is very important. The second aspect is to determine a payout structure that captures the response costs as a function of the intensity of the event, because you want to make sure that in an event that is that is a bigger event, right? There can be more damage, and therefore you need more funding to carry out the adequate response. And the third element is quantifying the expected frequency and intensity of the events, for which you use historical data. So in addition to this, critical to actually scaling parametric insurance is local interest in the mechanism, right? I think is showing that it can operate and generating that interest in other geographies. Also the presence of solid institutions and the capacity to coordinate among themselves. And as I mentioned previously, you also need these other elements of the system for the response, which include capacity building for establishing the governance to do the rapid response and the mechanism to channel the funding, which can be a pre-existing mechanism or establishing a new one that can be very effective in taking that payout fund and actually taking it to the site where the restoration will take place. Now, in scaling, the possibility of scaling parametric insurance to other ecosystems, we think that it is also there to respond after a hurricane. For example, insurance can provide payouts to restore mangroves following hurricane damage. And you mentioned the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. We have been discussing with Willis Towers Watson that parametric insurance can also be designed to reduce the financial risk to businesses impacted by hurricanes.
Thank you so much, MJ. Sorry, I'm going to have to cut you for a second. But thank you so much. That is absolutely fascinating. I'm hoping we'll be able to have some time for questions at the end. I just also do want to recognize the leadership of Maria Jose and Flora and Rocky in the Philippines, all women leaders who are doing this work as well. And I think that is a really important element of this, given the critical role of women in these coastal communities. And as recent reports from the Stockholm Resilience Centre have shown us, their vulnerability because of some of the inherent systems that have been set up there. We're going to turn now to a completely different part of the world. It's just somewhere near here. Don't know my UK geography that well. But you know, we often talk about nature-based solutions and think about the developing world and largely in the tropics. But those nature-based solutions can also be applied in areas where there are no mangroves or coral reefs. So let's talk about sand, and in particular sand dunes. Renaud, if you can talk us through the project that Van Oord has been involved with here in the UK, that would be super. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Karen. We appreciate being here. Your geography, you can see it on Google Earth. I think it's already showing. It's a little bit on the east coast of the UK. So we have done some reclamation works there. We'll show a little bit of video on it. You can see exactly what we've been doing. The great thing of this project is that we have been able to use a nature-based solution for a climate adaptation problem. The cliffs were eroding in the UK, and there was a big refinery standing behind it, and the refinery was almost moving into the sea. And instead of using hard defenses, it was chosen to use a soft defense, which we already had an example of in the Netherlands, which worked out well. It's called the sand engine or zandmotor in Dutch. It's a typical method where we put a large amount of sand in a sort of buffer which will be used by nature to bring it as a beach nourishment. So instead of coming every few years to do a beach nourishment, nature will take care that the sand will be delivered in place. I think second what I want to mention is that this was a project in climate adaptation where the government managed to combine public-private funding together with a grant of the Environment Agency. So I think that's very good that we see also that in these kind of projects that public-private partnerships can work to fund these projects. I think a third is a specialty is that it was used under it was procured under the contractors framework by the Environment Agency, which is a group of pre-selected contractors who already had done some competitive bidding to be selected in the first place, which enables the procurement in a much more faster way and then execute it in a more target cost-based solution, which I think is very beneficial for maybe other projects as well. I think having said that, time-wise, I think we have a small clip as well. Maybe the people can see or...
Building with nature is a philosophy about the design and construction of water-related infrastructure that harnesses natural materials and the forces of nature for the benefit of nature and humans, thereby strengthening nature, economy, and society. Building with nature is enabled, amongst others, by technology and system knowledge, a multi-stakeholder approach with inclusion of multiple institutes and benefits to make the business case, and innovative management to put it all together. The Bacton Sandscaping Coastal Flood Scheme in the United Kingdom is an innovative example of partnering and engineering with nature. It was designed to address the coastal erosion threat on the coastline to businesses and communities living between Bacton and Walcott. Through an inclusive public-private partnership, the business case was made to finance a sustainable solution that uses the power of the sea to naturally shift large quantities of sand down a coastline, providing natural flood protection to critical business facilities and neighbouring communities. Building with nature in action. Let's connect for climate adaptation action.
Thank you. Really, it's the lovely thing about this is being able to get out into all of these places and see what's going on and how they work, which is absolutely fascinating. We're running quite short on time, which seems to be the story of this COP, and maybe for the planet, which is why we have to act fast. But one of the key elements of this project was the partnership that was developed and the policy around it, which I think, reflecting back on what Maria Jose was saying, also critical to the development of these the parametric measures in Mesoamerica. Can you give us 30 seconds on why that is such an important element of actually making a successful nature-based solutions project?
Yeah, 30 seconds is short. I'll try. I think making the business case for you need in a lot of countries, especially when the countries abroad are, let's say, having less funds. It is difficult to really get the money on the table. So I think you really need to look at shareholders. Where can we create value, and how can we combine that value to come to a business case? And it probably needs to be part of it needs to be grants. And part of it needs to be coming from the local community, and I think we need to be very creative in finding more of these funds to fund all these nice nature-based solutions.
Excellent, thank you. So in the finance world, we would be starting to talk about blended finance and blended finance tools and how we partner philanthropy, private sector and public sector investments to drive action, but also to de-risk some of these investments as we move them forward. Let's head south. I got that piece of geography right, to Tanzania and Kretis. It would be lovely to hear from you some of the work that you and Aqua Farms have been doing on mangrove restoration and in your community, and how you are seeing that develop, as well as maybe you can talk to some of the challenges that you're facing and how you'd like to see those addressed.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity that I can also join virtually. So I am an executive secretary of Aqua Farms, and for more than 5 years, we've been working with the coastal communities in Tanzania at the village called Mbweni in Dar es Salaam, where we took a challenge of trying to use the nature-based solutions in protecting the coast. So for some years, our coast is losing because the mangroves are being degraded by communities' dependence for firewoods and several other usage. So we took that challenge, thereby we mobilized the 2 groups of women, and then we started to replant the mangroves. And right now we have over 4 hectares of mangroves that have been replanted. And for this reason, apart from that, we've also tried to create alternative, which I mentioned already, the dependency problem of the local communities, because even the poverty reports, they indicated that the coastal areas, the coastal village in Tanzania, they're more poor compared to the inland ones. So creating alternatives and resilience. And with that, we've mobilized in partnership with the local stakeholders for the beehive project, and the women will receive the training so that they can be able to produce the honeybee products, creating their resilience. And furthermore, we want to explore further and start the Blue Carbon project. It's a very growing initiatives in different parts of the East Africa and the world. And we are learning also from the Gazi community, and we want to establish the voluntary carbon trade, of which the community will benefit from just keeping the mangroves. And then the mangroves will benefit the people by protecting the coast, and also they can harness benefits like the beekeeping business. So it's more of linking people, nature, and livelihood together in solving nature pollution nature problem, which is caused by climate change and coastal erosion.
Thank you. Again, this is so inspiring, and I just thinking about honey and the bees and creating jobs, the mangroves, the resilience, the empowerment of women, and the involvement of the entire community. And maybe, Kritis, it would be really interesting if you could share with us what you see as the biggest challenges to you in this work, and how to build it forward, so that we can think about, maybe there are folks here who can help with some solutions, but we can also look at how we can put some partnerships together to help deal with those. And as you're coming on the screen, just to say that this project was one of the winners of the Ocean Resilience Innovation Challenge, which ORRAA ran last year. We work with projects and project leaders in small communities that are trying to access more capital and more investment, and we help mentor them with some of our partners from the private and the public sector to bring that investment to them. So we're really excited about where this project is going. So Kritis, maybe if you can just focus a little bit on some of those challenges to share with everyone here.
Yes, thank you so much. We've tried our best, but I think the major challenge is now we are facing is linking up the partnerships, especially the finance. So we have we know already what to do. We need the investments to put in place so that the investments will help to drive the project itself. And the project scalability that we want to ensure that the project established in all parts of Tanzania is we will have to establish the Mangrove Conservation Fund, of which the 15% of the money that will be generated from the blue carbon and beehives can be used to deposit in that Mangrove Conservation Fund, and then use later on in 5 years to scale it to the next village. So it's a self-sustaining. So what does it need? It's an initial kicking up investment that can result into the whole coast of Tanzania and other regions in East Africa to enjoy from the Mangrove Conservation Plan. And so the major challenge is finance. We've done our best, but and then I would also like to take this opportunity to thank ORRAA for the mentorship. And then, I hope that as long as we get the investment, this thing can revolutionize the nature, can help in carbon sequestration, and also benefits the people of Tanzania. Thank you.
Thank you, Kritis. Thank you. There's a real palpable feeling here at COP about action, and I think these projects really give us some inspiring examples of where the action is really happening on the ground. But what you also see is some red threads running through all of these examples. So just to explain to the audience what we did is we asked all of our speakers who've presented their projects here to come up with questions which we'd like to take through into the next part of the event to ask our panel for the next part, really about how can we take this action, how can we take these projects and what we're learning through to the decision makers on the policy, on the financing, and on the legislation side. So I'd like to hand over to Karen. She's going to take us through into the third part of the session with the panel, and we're going to ask them some questions from our projects.
Thank you, Rachel. And maybe if Inyas, if you could come up, since you are the person here from our next panel, as we shift over. And really, this is part of how we like to work at the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance. We're very focused on solutions. So we've got an amazing group of leaders with us this afternoon. We have Inyas Begin, who is the ocean lead for the climate champions for the UNFCCC. We have Paula Pagines from Willis Towers Watson. their Climate and Resilience Hub, Aditi Gupta from Convergence Finance, which focuses on blended finance vehicles to help drive investments into projects like this, and then Greg Watson from the Inter-American Development Bank, who has been one of the brains, a key kind of mover and shaker in driving investments and into nature-based solutions and natural innovations. So I think what we would like to do is, if we can, maybe Rachel, read out those questions from our panel before, and then we will turn to each. We have a question for each of the folks on this panel from the panel before, and then we'll turn to them for those answers so that folks can hear what those questions were.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with MJ's question. So MJ asked us how we think the parametric insurance for the reefs in the Mesoamerica reef, which she presented, is creating a good precedent for other sites around the world.
And maybe Paula, if we can turn to you and ask you to respond to that question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to share all the work that we're doing. It's really a privilege. So how has the parametric product set the precedent? Well, the first and foremost is that we have demonstrated that if well structured, we can implement these parametric protections in relatively high risk zones. The second most important precedent is that we were able to demonstrate that we can get the right insurance pricing for conservation, products. So with those two bases, now as we look to scale up this pilot, where insurance has supercharged the brigades that the MAR Fund is deploying in coastal communities, now we have basis to build upon to geodiversify. So that right pricing will allow us to better tackle the pricing for new areas, some high risk, other low risk. It will help us as well demonstrate how we can use payouts not only to support the work of brigades, but also to explore new response mechanisms, so that as we scale up, we can build on all these precedents in order to develop new protections that are tailored, because that is also of the utmost important. We need to tailor each of these solutions to different stakeholders in different geographies and communities. And it's also setting the precedent to demonstrate how we can, via public-private partnerships, involve different stakeholders, especially on the private sector, which is a point that Maria Jose was starting to allude to. Especially if we think of private companies working to deploy more of their climate disclosures, and especially the private sector companies that are embedded and operating in these coastal areas. They have experienced the impact of natural extreme weather events into the reef. They also experience how the reefs are protecting infrastructure. So we are hoping that these type of products will allow us to start protecting new investments, generating cash flows that then will go into protecting coastal areas. So it has been a tremendous precedent setting, and we're looking forward to scaling it up.
Fantastic, thanks Paula. And the leadership that Willis has been showing in this is really incredible as well. The mind bending and the mind shifting that needs to happen to adapt these products is incredible, and your team has done a really super job in that. So why don't we go to the next question?
Yeah, I think Paula touched on stakeholders and multiple parties at the table. And I think that's a nice transition into the question which we've received from Reinoud, which is about how can we speed up the deployment of this multi-party funding for coastal infrastructure projects, and not only speed it up, but how can we as contractors get involved at an earlier stage to bring our knowledge and our experience on delivering nature-based solutions for coastal resilience projects.
And I think we're going to throw that question at Greg. Greg, if you can answer that and talk as well to how we can speed the deployment of some of these projects and where the multilateral banks fit in on that.
Sure, thanks, Karen, and it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, maybe if I just speak a little bit on how MDBs can work on this topic. And I hope that you heard last week that the MDBs issued a joint statement on nature, people, and planet, that the IDB helped to lead a coalition of our MDBs colleagues in issuing this statement. And it was part of the IDB's Vision 2025 approach to climate. And that statement really looks at 3 levels: mainstreaming in our own institutions, mainstreaming inside countries, and then greening finance and greening financial institutions. And I think that's part of the answer to the question. If we look at first mainstreaming in our own institutions, it's making sure that these value cases, these topics are included across all our sectors and also across all of our country dialogues at the earliest stages, so that when we're working with countries very early on in what they're going to finance with us, that looking at nature-based solutions and nature as an asset is in that dialogue strategically from the beginning. Second, I'd say that at the IDB, we're supporting many countries in looking at these topics across their ministries. A couple of examples: we're working in Colombia and mapping all of their different national strategies to see where nature-based solutions can actually support outcomes for resilience, but also for mitigation, also for income generation. And in Costa Rica, we worked with ORRAA actually to develop the COVID-19 Blue Economy Recovery Strategy, which was looking at, both coastal resilience, fishery income, tourism income, and what are the combinations of grants, equity investment, and loans that needed to be put together for specific projects, a menu then of 15 concrete projects, and then the financial vehicles that need to track that investment. So that's kind of at the national level. And then also at the kind of finance level, looking at these innovative financial mechanisms so that, at the IDB, we recently announced with the New York Stock Exchange working on in announcing a new asset class for nature where you can value the natural capital that's developed by these kinds of projects. And so a private sector actor or a government could then basically value and trade that and extract and monetize a value that currently is not able to be monetized. You can do that in an ocean ecosystem, and we're starting to look at that in certain areas. We're also starting to develop debt nature bonds around ocean ecosystems in some Caribbean countries. We have a project that we're working on right now. IDB Invest, our investment arm, announced a blue bond last week, which hopefully some of you saw, which is going to be investing in both resilience and water infrastructure. And then also making sure that we're working with countries so that they have the right plumbing in their systems. In Chile, we worked to help create the first conservation trust fund, similar to MARFund, so that they actually have the capacity to do the kinds of things that MARFund is doing, in order to be able to channel these funds and in order to work with local communities and science centers as well. So I think we have a role to play at all of these pieces. And maybe if we have a second round of questions, I can talk a little bit more about some of our research on nature-based solutions.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's fascinating to hear the bandwidth that you have at IDB to engage on these different issues and the various elements, the different building blocks that are really needed to get this going. And I know, as Maria Jose was saying, with the Mesoamerican reef and the parametric measure there, without the valuation of the reef that IDB supported, we would never have got to the product. So all of those elements being absolutely key. Okay, Rachel, what is next on our itinerary here?
The next question, which we have for the panel, is coming from Flora, who presented the project with the fisherfolk in the Philippines. And building actually on what Greg has said, Flora would like to know about how can we tackle investment and innovation into the ocean and coastal space, especially in regards to natural capital. And I think that question quite naturally goes to Aditi from Convergence Finance.
Aditi, over to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Rachel. That's an excellent question from Flora. And for those of us who don't know Convergence, Convergence is the global network for blended finance, and we focus on generating blended finance data, deal flow, and intelligence. And we also run a market accelerator that provides pre-investment capital and technical support to design financial structures to draw private sector investment into SDG-aligned projects, including nature-based solutions. And this question is so critical because in our historical deals database, where we have over 700 transactions in emerging markets and blended finance, we have seen that a very small percentage of the transactions goes towards SDG 14 life underwater, and much more traction is needed in this space. What we see is the best prospect for innovation and investment in the sector is where ocean conservation and resilience objectives intersect with commercial imperatives and commercial objectives, and where there is this confluence of interest. And this could be in areas such as the global seafood supply chain, the tourism industry, and we've already heard some examples in the previous panel. And what we have seen in this space and in blended finance more generally, according to our State of Blended Finance report, is that practitioners to increase innovation and investment should focus on scaling proven and replicable blended finance structures. And this could be simplified fund structures or bond structures. And to take an example of this, just last week, one of the largest debt restructurings for marine conservation was announced in Belize. This was a transaction over $360 million that restructured over $550 million of the debt of Belize and generated over $180 million in marine conservation. And this transaction required the collaboration of the Nature Conservancy, Credit Suisse, the government of Belize, and the US International Development Finance Corporation to really bring this transaction to fruition. And this transaction was built and replicated on the basis of a similar transaction in Seychelles a few years ago. And we supported the replication of the Seychelles transaction through a Convergence design funding grant that was through our Global Emerging Markets window funded by the Canadian government. But we have to admit that such transactions at a large scale are still rare in the market. And we find that one of the key barriers to investing in the sustainable blue economy and nature-based solutions is the relatively high risk of projects in this sector. And we've already heard earlier this morning about tools to understand and assess ocean and coastal risk, which is great to see. In addition to these risk factors, projects in this space are also often coupled with new underlying business models with unreliable or untested revenue streams. And this coupling of risk increases the business risk in these investments. And what is critical to addressing this risk is the use of catalytic capital, that is capital such as grants from philanthropies or donors or low interest loans, really capital not looking for commercial rate of returns, to address the risk return profile using blended finance structures to make these deals palatable for commercial investment, which is where the trillions of dollars that is the financing gap in the blue economy lie.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Aditi, we're going to have to stop you there for a second because we want to make sure that we get Kratos' question asked, and we've still got a little bit of time for some questions here. So, Rachel, I'm going to hand back to you.
Yeah, we have one final question from our previous group of panelists, and that was from Kratos, who presented the project of the mangrove restoration going on in Tanzania. And his question was really actually about linking these small, locally led projects with this bigger picture of what is happening. And I think what we would really like to understand, or what Kratos would really like to understand, is how these small, locally led nature-based solutions fit into the bigger picture of what is happening in terms of coastal resilience.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question. So first of all, on the big picture, I should start by saying that at COP26, nature is really at the center stage, and that makes a significant difference, and in particular the ocean. We saw during the Ocean Day on Friday some really significant announcements, including ORRAA, but others, that really set the stage for much more action in the coming years. COP26 is a COP of implementation and action, and all the solutions that I've heard about today really give high hope that we can deliver on the race to resilience targets of 4 billion people making more resilient by 2030. Already today the Race to Resilience launched the metrics framework, and we already have 2.3 billion people that are covered by the Race to Resilience partners, including ORRAA, but we need much more than that to deliver the target. So that's one thing. The second thing on how we can bring that at scale, and I think that has been covered already, but is really to make the business case for nature-based solution. And much more need to be done for companies to understand the value of nature in building the resilience of the communities in which they operate, or in where their assets are located. It's not about investing only in grey infrastructure, but nature can bring really what we need. A second element to bring that at scale, I think it's an example for Tanzania and connecting that with what the large companies are aiming for. There is a large movement for blue carbon projects and credits. Let me be very clear, blue carbon credit is really at the end of your decarbonization journey when you are already on the path approved by science, aligned with 1.5, then you can do this little plus to build and invest into nature for resilience or mitigation. And on Friday, we heard the announcement from Netflix that they launched Blue Carbon's Buyers Club Alliance with Salesforce, Amazon, Microsoft. And I think these millions of dollars available by these companies is really a chance to, for this small, locally led project to have the finance, if the guardrails are in place, to build the resilience of communities and with positive impact on biodiversity. And also the example made by the Nature Conservancy on Depth Swat for Nature should be really bring at scale, because I think this is really clear now that we can do it. There are other mechanisms, and I will really encourage more governments to look into that option. Finally, I think it's to bring this resilience issue at scale. It's an issue of breaking the silos between nature, resilience, and mitigation. It's very important to have a holistic perspective. Sometimes there is projects that are only focusing on nature conservation, but if at the beginning they are focusing also on resilience, this can bring win-win. More at the global level, I think at the UN level, it's important that we connect the CBD, the desertification agenda, and the UNFCCC climate agenda to really connect these elements all together. So that will be my few points on how we can bring this really exciting project at scale for the coming years of action.
Thank you so much, Inyas. And you know, it's interesting, in the ocean community for years, there's been a discussion about whether we talk about an ocean or oceans with an S on. And our community has, this is a big issue, right? Our community has landed on the word ocean without the S. And the reason for that is talking about the ocean as an integrated whole, an ecosystem that we can't divide the tuna from the whales or the deep sea from the pelagic zone, higher up in the water column. We actually need to look at it as a complete system. And I think this is exactly where we are getting to on this issue of nature-based solutions and coastal resilience, that we need to look at it as a system. We need to have partners along with us to help solve for these problems, because none of us can do it alone. The key here is how we can activate at scale. So I just want to turn to the audience quickly. We don't have very much time. We've got about 10 minutes left to see if there are any questions here in the room for any of our panelists, but in particular this last group who have given their time to answer any questions. And while folks are thinking about that, I know there was an online question for Lindsay that I am hoping Federico will pull up on his phone very quickly. so that we can make sure that that is being asked. And if anyone does have a question up in the room here, you can let me know. Otherwise, I have loads of questions for the panelists.
Okay. Lindsay, question from the virtual crowd. So in your in the tool that you have presented today, how do you value the various benefits that I guess ecosystem services are providing, and how do you compare them with each other, I guess across geographies probably?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, in terms of how we measure the impacts or the benefits of coastal ecosystems in reducing flooding, in this first parameter of the index, we are specifically looking at coastal flood hazard and measuring the difference between flood depth and extent in different geographies with mangroves and coral reefs present and without them present. And adding on top of that is the layer on population and assets at risk. So that's measured in terms of sort of number of people that are protected by mangroves annually, as well as the dollar value in assets that are protected. And of course, as we build the index out further, this will include the projections into 2030 and 2050, and that data sort of globally as well. And we'll also be building the index out even further into layering that data with or the flood risk maps with data on social vulnerability and being able to identify where communities are both at high risk of coastal flooding and where there's high vulnerability, to be able to identify where nature-based solutions can make the biggest difference for vulnerable populations.
Thank you, Lindsay. I want to go back, since I haven't seen any hands raised in this room over here, to Greg and Paula and Aditi and Inas, and maybe you can each think and respond for a minute in terms of what you each think the most critical investments are that need to be made. We've seen that in this space, partnership is critical, linking these various things together is critical, but less than 1% of climate finance is going into ocean and coastal solutions at the moment. So how do we get from that less than 1% to really getting to scale? We've seen the Secretary General of the UN talking about 50% of climate finance being invested into adaptation. What do you each think are the pathways or the seaways that we need to take to get there? And maybe, Greg, if we can start with you, then go to Paula, then Ignace, and then let Aditi have the last word.
Sure, thanks, Karen. And I'll be pretty brief. I'll also point people, we just published with WRI 3 studies specifically on financing nature-based solutions that are on our website, which might be interesting for this crowd. But we also found that only 0.6 to 1.4% of total climate finance is going to nature-based solutions for adaptation. You know, at IDB, we've done 815 million in the last 5 years, which is also, I mean, it's a large number for us, but small drop in the bucket. What we found in order to scale that up really are 3 main points. One is, you know, we've been talking here about more engagement from investors, and we need to look at those specific models that have been successful. We've seen tax funds, utility fees, return-based investments like loans, and there's models out there, and we need to basically dig into what made them work and replicate them. And I mean, I think we need to do a better job looking at what's already worked and looking and replicating that. The second, and I think we haven't talked about it that much here, is robust monitoring and evaluation of the projects themselves to inspire investor confidence in green-gray solutions and in green solutions in order to have those metrics as well for investors to be able to know that they're getting what they paid for. And then the last is what we were talking about also, this really early upstream planning of incorporating natural capital considerations in infrastructure planning and to government processes early on. And so that creates the opportunities for the private bidders later. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Super. Thanks, Greg, so much. Paula, if we can turn to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. So I think actually it's the link between finance and the impact of the local communities, and that is related to the understanding of the dependencies that we have on natural assets. So back to a prior point, as institutions are increasingly disclosing their climate-related risks, I think those dependencies on the natural assets become more illuminated. We start quantifying them. And then that ocean risk can help identify that economic dependency of our private sector operations on those natural assets. If we understand the economic interest on a natural asset such as coral reefs, that's already a game changer. We start assigning the right value to it. That triggers action. So that's the immediate connection that has to happen. And that will bring to fruition those public-private partnerships that we're so much talking about as we quantify and understand those dependencies on the natural world that force us to start protecting it.
Thank you. Inyas.
I think my point will be actually very similar to what the other panelists just said. I think it's really about educating and informing and building the business case for nature. I think we really broke our relation with nature, and we have to reconnect with nature, that we don't only depend on engineering and great solution, but that nature can bring a lot, and we have to share this message much broader to the the COP or the CBD processes, but get that to the business community and to the real market. I think that will make a significant difference for people to, again, reconnect with nature and its values.
Thank you. And Aditi, over to you.
Thanks, Karen, for the last word. My panelists have already covered a lot of the recommendations. But from my perspective, I think what is critical is that the innovation, while it is additional to the market for investments in ocean, is familiar and replicable for the investors, and it is not completely out of the box to facilitate faster transactions to market. And where there are icebreaker transactions necessary for new business models, that there is enough incubation and pre-transaction support to make those transactions a reality.
Thank you, and thank you all also for the brevity with which you answered that. We've got about a minute left, so there is so much information to summarize here, but I think what we are seeing through all of these participants is how, with that basis of knowledge and understanding from data and modeling, informing action on the ground from projects led from the bottom up, but also from the top down, from the insurance and the financial sector, working with communities, working in partnership, and the critical importance of engaging public sector finance, of de-risking the investments, and making sure that we've got the concessional finance and the guarantees in place is going to be absolutely critical to building the resilience of communities, alleviating poverty, and building forward in a more equitable and sustainable way. So we are looking, as the Ocean Risk and Resilience Innovation Challenge, at working with our partners and with the Global Resilience Partnership on all of these elements. And we look forward to working with all of you as we do that. So Rachel, final word from you.
Yeah, thank you. Very inspiring session, and I think a lot of work is already going on, and we still have plenty to do, which is great for all of us. So I would actually just like to wrap up by saying thank you to everyone who's joined us here in the room, but also thank you to everyone who joined us online and shared your questions with us. And of course, a massive thank you to all our panelists and guests who joined us here today. Thank you.